Hello, and welcome to States of Splendor's podcast number 6 today. So, if you've been following the podcasts and listening them from number 1 up to number 6, you probably noticed that there's a certain build-up. We're trying to give the necessary information lines so that you understand this perspective that has to do with appreciating the beauty in this world through the manifestation of splendor in objects, businesses, people, places, stories, various manifestations. So today's subject of the podcast is called The Right Stuff. Not for the astronauts like the movie was, but The Right Stuff, Splendor, the stuff of legends. So what makes the stuff of legends? Stuff of legends definitely is something. How does legend material come about? Well, it definitely has to go through the test of time, which was our podcast number 3. It has to go through space as well on podcast number 4. So as you see, there's a build-up to today's subject. Now, what the podcast aims to analyze is the fact that certain, for example, objects, let's just take objects, certain objects are created and their destiny is to be discarded because they have no real value as such. Nothing particular would want us to hold on to them. Nothing particular would make them have value in our lives through time and through generations. However, other objects usually are the ones that are made with love. Of course, this is in parenthesis. What happens is that the object or the creation has something that makes it worthy of becoming the stuff of legends. So this exactly is the process that we're going to explore in today's podcast without going into too complex notions either. It should be quite entertaining, and I hope you can give us your comments about it and your suggestions for future subjects, questions if you have any, and we thank you very much for all of your contributions. So enjoy the podcast, sit back, relax, and see you next time. Bye-bye. Hello to everyone. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon. Welcome to States of Splendor. This is Patrick Asikian, and this is the States of Splendor podcast number 6. So before we begin, we must have a nice little shout out to our first fans. So one goes out to Manuel, and I must tell him that I noted the fact that he found that our introduction in the first podcast was too long. Indeed it was, but it was because it was the first podcast, so we needed a lengthy introduction for future reference for people who would like to know what the origins of the States of Splendor is. So today, what is the subject at States of Splendor, where authenticity transmits? Today's subject is the right stuff, splendor, the stuff of legends. So let's begin, shall we? So what makes a phenomenon worthy of entrance into the domain of legend? This is the subject, the question of this broadcast. When we're talking about the domain of legend, the stuff of legends, we're not talking about myths, we're not talking about Greek titans, we're not talking about Zeus or any type of Venus or Jupiter, Roman, Greek, or any type of mythological figure. We're definitely talking about legend, which has at least a claim to a basis in reality. We're not talking about necessarily fantastically humongous phenomena. We're just talking about splendor-filled phenomena. Are there still today such newly authentic rarities? rarities that are the stuff of legends, things that we talk about still today. Like, for example, the Stradivarius violin was, still is because the objects still remain today. The Stradivarius is the stuff of legends. On a big scale, of course. Now you can find the same phenomena on a smaller scale, and that's what we'll delve into today. So, are there still today such authentic rarities? Either it can be a creator of a new school of craft, or a true master of an existing current. So it's either a new school that has been created, or the true master of an existing current. Because Stradivarius is exactly the thing that we're talking about. Stradivarius has the right stuff, of course. However, Stradivarius is no longer alive. And the question of today is, are there still today such authentic rarities? So, of course, there is still today Stradivariuses, but we cannot say, well, it still is living culture because the Stradivarius can still play amazingly splendid music. However, we're looking for a current, existing, living, new school, or a master of an existing school that manifests either businesses or people or places that are worthy of legend, that are filled with splendor. So here today is the quote of the day. There is a quote that was made by Bill Clinton, who came to Montreal once and made a speech. And he concluded his speech with the following, saying the fate of the world would be decided by this following question. This is not a verbatim quote, however. So it's whether we concentrate on our interesting differences or our common humanity. So this, if you examine this statement philosophically, the fate of the world is decided by if we delve upon our interesting differences or upon our common humanity. Well, this is not a static reality. It's a constantly flowing phenomenon. Actually, one nourishes the other. So there's 2 points here. There's our interesting differences within the different cultures we have, and our common humanity that we share. So there is a common global culture that we share, of course. And there are some more local cultures, our interesting differences. Out of our interesting differences, out of all cultures of all the world, of course, everything is not valid. Everything is not valuable to the point that it should become a part of UNESCO's World Heritage Project. There are some things that are worthy and must be transmitted to future generations, and other things that, like, for example, the art of making tools that were used for washing clothes 200 years ago, that may have been interesting back then, but it will not survive today. So there's always a selection to be made, but our interesting differences, out of our interesting differences, there is definitely in each culture a certain part, a certain selection, a certain bouquet of cultural items that will eventually become part of our common humanity and what is known as UNESCO's World Heritage. So, as we can see, one nourishes the other, and it's always a question of balance. Something I've learned after all these long years that go by so fast. So, we have here our first item. Our first item, strangely, if you follow this train of thought, is the star system. So the star system is kind of one of the manifestations of our common humanity, of our global culture. So the star system does, in a sense, have the capacity to transform people into legends. However, it's mostly confined to show business. So you may find some manifestations of the right stuff and the stuff of legends filled with splendor within show business. There may be an overlap. However, the true splendor, true manifestations of masterhood in the literary, music, and theatrical fields often transcend the show business stage. These true masters of literature, theater, music, and related fields are often beyond the show business reality. However, there are sometimes acknowledged by it, but only after the originator of the works has departed. So the star system cherry picks its favorite items to showcase on its various stages and platforms. Usually, and understandably, of course, it mostly selects the ones that are most marketable and profitable for its own show business. So true manifestations of splendor operate under, and sometimes over, the radar. They operate under the radar most of the time. However, they sometimes are caught in time by the star system and are put on a stage. Those occasions are quite rare, but they do exist, and it's quite memorable when they do. Let's go now to something that definitely transcends the show business world. If you talk about Stradivarius, my example here, because I once used to play the violin, Stradivarius operated in secret. Of course, we're not going to make a show about how Stradivarius made his violins, because first of all, it's a secret and nobody knows what it is, because he actually took his secrets of splendid violin making to the grave. So nobody really knows. However, there are some speculations, such as he used to take the wood used for making the violins and put them for quite a long length of time under the waters of a lake. Now, this is only speculation, but in any case, this was an authentic manifestation of true splendor, authenticity, and the stuff of legends. He definitely started a new school of craft, and this school of craft died with him. As you know, the aim of the game here at States of Splendor is to document and transmit glimpses into these phenomena as they unfold today. The question of this podcast today is, do they still unfold today? Are there still people, places, businesses, and objects that happen to exist in various fields of human existence in 2018 and beyond? This is a good question, because when one looks into history, you can find many examples of this. However, when one looks into the present situation, it's very difficult. It's easier to find out who the true legends are in hindsight. However, today, it's very rare. However, they do once upon a time pop up on the radar of the show business field. However, it's very rare. There are some people, and some who will object and stipulate that everything in this exercise is all in vain, for in the future, creation and performance will virtually be limited to the domain of artificial intelligence. However, one wonders if human activity suddenly becomes obsolete or without consequence once a certain level of technological advance has attained a specific threshold. There still exists a wondrous underwater world, isn't there? Even if some people some creatures decided to walk on land and breathe, there still exists a wondrous underwater world. Of course, we're not talking about worshipping the ashes of the past here. That's very important, because this can be found in the world of folklore and in museums. This folklore is concentrated on a bygone era of cultural manifestations that are over today. So that is related to the domain of museums. And we're talking about, actually today, we're talking about unique, living manifestations of cultural or material splendor. We're definitely not talking about wonderful items, like if you go to look at great wines or great jewelry, great cars. Of course, they're wonderful and they can indeed be manifestations of splendor, but what interests us today are not simply those items of splendor that are already listed in our media, various media. We're looking for true authentic manifestations regardless of if they appear in our media, in our show business, or not. So a small item can definitely reside on the Mount Olympus in the domain of the legends. So even a simple cup of coffee, we're not talking about a Cartier watch here, we're talking about a simple cup of coffee. It can rise to those heights of Mount Olympus. And the thing is, not all cups of coffee can rise to those heights. If not, it wouldn't be a special cup of coffee. So not all can, but if this cup of coffee is extracted from authentic Blue Mountain beans, it has built a nest on the mountainside, alongside with the titans of Greece. In States of Splendor, we tend to look for authentic, living manifestations of splendor that have a certain function in society. William Morris was born in 1834. He was an English Victorian poet, author, and also a textile designer. He famously said, "Nothing useless can be truly beautiful." So this is why dead arts, dead crafts, and the superficially aesthetic phenomena are often short-lived. There are definite aesthetic periods that have some cultural significance. We can think of the arts and crafts movement. We can think of the different periods of design in France and in Germany or elsewhere in the world. However, they tend nowadays to go and come and go faster and faster. There is another phenomenon that is definitely not the place where we can count on for finding true manifestations of authentic splendor. There is the viral phenomenon. So this is perhaps, again, because of the multiplication of the cameras and the establishment of an enormous amount of individuals who are producers of video content. Some splendid, truly authentic phenomena gets covered, of course. However, as everybody knows, the vast majority of this viral video phenomena is clickbait. So the viral video phenomena has nevertheless evolved between 2008 and 2018, and more people search for quality content. So as time goes by, and more authentic examples of splendor are caught under various cameras. And this is a quite interesting phenomenon because it was not as widely available before. As we see, the star system, show business, and internet viral video realities can sometimes cover a person, business, object, or place that exudes splendor. There is definitely some overlap. These media worlds do not, however, define nor do they strictly coincide with the existence or manifestations of true examples of living splendor. The splendor lies elsewhere, hidden within the real world. And that's what's the most important. True personal experience. For example, there once was such a thing as artisanal cars. So artisanal cars are a thing of the past, or almost are they? No, they still do exist. However, they're not as widely known as the fast period of artisanal cars that started around the 1910s, right up until the 1950s. So in that period, there was a very rich and productive period for the French automobile makers. There were some very conventional automobile makers, such as, for example, Renault or Peugeot. So these are very conventional ones. However, there was also another side to the French automotive production, which was much more splendor-induced. It was the world of artisanal cars. We're not talking about cars made in the garage of some individual. However, some of them started that way. We're talking about very highly refined car designs. So in that period, you could find the following: Bugatti, Deli, Hotchkiss, and Talbot. The companies would produce their cars, but on top of that, there was a craft that was known as carrossier. A carrossier is a craft that actually crafts the body of a car. At that time, cars were made in such a small quantity that one could actually order a car and have it custom made to one's taste. So the car would be bought from Bugatti, for example, and then brought to a carrossier who would then specifically design the body of the car according to the wishes of the buyer. So these cars were individual orders, and they were tailor-made carrossier artisans, and they made absolutely splendid works of art. So this, of course, is a manifestation of splendor, but it's not a manifestation of living splendor, because these carrossiers have actually departed this world. So they are not to be found today apart from in museums. Now, speaking of museums, you will find in the description below a book in which you can find it's a splendid book where there's all sorts of pictures and documentation on the history of one of the biggest of these French coach builders, of these French carrossiers and French automobile manufacturers, Deli. And so you can find the link to this book in the description below, but you can also find a link to a video that was made at the Mullins Automotive Museum exhibit, and it's an exhibit called L'époque des carrossiers, the art and times of French coach builders. And you can see incredible examples of these cars which had designs that were really, really, really amazing. And it's just under 10-minute video. I suggest you watch it, and you can see that lost art of artisanal cars. This calls for a small addendum because the art of the carrossiers is not a completely lost art. Let's take Bugatti again, for example. Bugatti, maker of the Divo and the Chiron, released a car to celebrate its design history on the 9th of March 2019. It released a car they made inspired by by one of their legendary cars, the Bugatti Type 57C Atlantic. It's a legendary car, and it's like the one that's shown in the picture above. So, in honor of that car, they therefore released what is known as la voiture noire, the black car. Sorry, there's no picture of the voiture noire here because we do the best we can to exclusively use pictures that we are permitted to use. But I strongly suggest you do take a look at it. La voiture noire was made in one unique single car. The body was crafted by hand and designed by Etienne Salomé, a Bugatti designer. It has a carbon fiber body, and it's actually the world's most expensive car ever made. It's worth 11 million euros. So the art of artisanal cars still exists, but it's a very, very exclusive one now. Well, it's much more exclusive than at the time of the original carrossiers of the first half of the 20th century. The artisanal car art has thus been relegated to concept cars. At the time, individually carrossiered cars were very expensive, but obviously not as much as a concept car. So today, on one side, we have massive standardization of many products. If you look at cars, they look more and more all the same. But at the same time, there is a great potential for the stuff of legends in the world of custom-made products. And there is also an increase in the availability of custom-made products in our time. So there you have it, the current paradox in new products. Let's hear it for La Voiture Noire and artisanal cars, the stuff of legends. So far, I haven't given you true examples today of authentic living splendor. And that's what we're searching for today. Is there still an example of the stuff of legends? Well, there definitely is. More than one. It doesn't have to be something big. It can be a simple cup of coffee. So there is no black or white. You cannot say, oh, this is a manifestation of splendor and this is absolutely not a manifestation of splendor. There's no black or white. As the current of balance tells us, there's only shades of gray. So there is some underlying splendor in each and every item. Even a can of Coca-Cola probably has a little spark of splendid culture within it. So everything is different shades of gray, which means that different items, not necessarily expensive items, not necessarily very famous people, not necessarily very big companies, can also make very, very valuable contributions to humanity's culture. And sometimes some phenomena that start out as very simple, modest endeavors go on to become the stuff of legends, or actually accomplished legends. A good example of the right stuff can be found in Montreal, Quebec, where this is being broadcast from today. New York has its pastrami, Cat's Deli and the such. Montreal has smoked meat, and the legendary Schwartz Deli. In 1928, Reuben Schwartz, a Jewish immigrant from Romania, founded the institution, a small, modest deli on Saint Laurent, Montreal's main street, that divides its east and west side. There they served liver steak, smoked meat sandwiches, and other kosher-style dishes, although not authentically kashrut compliant. They are known for their smoked meat sandwiches served on rye bread with American-style mustard. By the way, if ever you go there, I highly recommend getting the old-fashioned cut, my father's favorite. What makes the venue legendary, first of all, is the smoked meat itself, which they smoke in the back store. They smoke on the premises itself. And I might add that certain municipal actors would like to ban the on-site live smoking, which, might I add, I find quite insane as an idea. I think this smoking should continue because it's simply a patrimonial site, and it's not really a big contributor to pollution. Anyways, so Schwartz's smoked meat is smoked on the spot. And what's special about the place where they smoke it is that they have an almost century's worth of buildup inside, which only actually adds to the flavor. Also, the spice used for curing the meat are also quite unique. They eventually became copied and used widely as Montreal steak seasoning. Now it's almost available worldwide. Well, maybe not in Yaoundé, Cameroon, or in Jakarta, Indonesia, but at least all over North America, Australia, England, and many other places. The ingredients of Montreal steak seasoning vary, but most of the time they're black pepper, coriander, garlic, cayenne pepper, dill seed, salt, and often more other ingredients. So Schwartz's smoked meat is also cured in these spices for exactly 10 days. Secondly, the Schwartz's Deli legend also comes from its greasy spoon look. Since 1928, it's been in its modest location in Saint Laurent Avenue. It was offered many times to make it into a worldwide franchise, but all of the owners always refused. Doing so would actually alter the authenticity of the deli and thus dilute its splendor. So today, every day, if you're patient enough to line up outside the deli, you'll be seated at the exact same location and store and stare at the exact walls that so many people from around the world of previous generations appreciated. That small is beautiful, authentic is beautiful approach is, too, one of Schwartz's secrets. Schwartz's Hebrew delicatessen, the stuff of legends. Now, many would argue, though, that this is a historical example of the stuff of legends because it's not recent enough. We're thus still searching for a current example of the right stuff. Okay, so let's get to it then. We just saw in the past 20 minutes that a big part of known legends come from at least 3 sources: historical references, viral phenomenon, and the star system. However, today, as media is global and the influence of AI is ever increasing, to find the stuff of legends, we need to search off the beaten track. Often, today's legend material is already on many video sharing websites or on TV. However, they have not yet had the benefit of the passage of time to give people the necessary perspective to realize that those subjects are indeed legend material. Actually, by definition, to be a legend, people must make stories about you, or at least have been informed about you, which is why
Legends, in today's world, can often become legends without becoming stars or becoming viral phenomenon. Thus, there are, in today's world, today as in 20 years from now today also, other forms of the stuff of legends. And here are these other forms. These are secret heroes, humble heroes, labors of love, and well-kept secrets. Of course, in reality, these are not empirical categories. The reality is often a mix of many of these categories in different quantities. Okay, so here are 5 manifestations in today's world of the right stuff, the stuff of legends. Unfortunately, we won't be able to go in depth about each one of them. Maybe they'll be the subject of a future S.O.S. podcast or article, but here are 5 pieces of the right stuff. Without further ado, here we go. Number 1 is Reed Booth. Reed Booth is a jack of all trades. He's a sign painter, a gemologist, a writer, an accomplished musician, and much more. He's originally from Wisconsin, and he's a resident of Bisbee in Arizona since 1985. Apart from the above-mentioned trades, Mr. Booth was also a mead maker. Mead is honey wine. His interests in the product of bees oddly got him into a special field. His field was removing bees that are a nuisance. Eventually, he became the go-to guy for removing a particularly dangerous kind of bee, the killer bee, or also known as the Africanized bee. He removes them with huge body armor, but so doing, he still got stung occasionally by killer bees a few times. The pain is terrible. It's numbing pain, and each sting removes a bit of his life expectancy, actually. But he's good at what he does, so much that he was able to harvest the killer bees' nests and actually extract the honey from them. He's one of the world's rare sources of true killer bees' honey. This product is actually available in some links below. Due to the small quantity, it may not be from the killer bee guy, may not be from Reed Booth, but there is one of the rare sources of organic killer bee honey that are available. You can see video description right below. The link is right there. So Reed Booth and his killer bee honey. This is the stuff of legends. Number 2 was André Senecal. One day, in the Gaspésian Peninsula, André Senecal was walking on the shores of the Gulf of the St. Lawrence River, and he noticed some white objects reflecting light in the sand. He was quite attracted to this object, and he was wondering what it was. He saw that it was attached to a fish carcass, so he brought it to the nearby fishermen, and those fishermen told him it was actually the carcass of a black sturgeon. And this black sturgeon was a fish that they fish. Now, the black sturgeon, if you've ever seen one, is really a pretty big fish. It's a humongous prehistoric fish. Outside of its body, it still looks like a kind of prehistoric fish, and it has a kind of armor. And these are called dermic shields. And André Senecal had an intuition something could be done with this kind of material. So with time, he developed a method, a technique to carve these shields and turn them into an ornamental object. Over the years, he finally had the material analyzed by Laval University researchers. And the analysis actually revealed that the material used by André Senecal, these dermic shields of the black sturgeon, is molecularly identical to walrus ivory. So thus they can legally be termed to be pieces of ivory. So Mr. Senecal thus discovered a new source of ivory, what is now called sea ivory. It's a wonderful discovery done by recycling fisheries products that are anyways thrown away by the fishermen. So this new kind of ivory, sea ivory, is another small piece of the stuff of legends. Number 3. Number 3 is René Redzepi. This one needs no introduction. He's already a star chef. René Redzepi, we can already know, is an accomplished legend. Even at the early age of 42, René's restaurant has been crowned the world's best restaurant at least 4 times. This is because he has single-handedly reestablished terroir cuisine as the dominant gastronomical trend in the world. Terroir being cooking in a way that reflects the unique characteristics of the environment around you. His restaurant is called Noma and is in Copenhagen, in Denmark. His restaurant has already had 2 Michelin Guide stars and will probably get a 3rd one. This is because of the terroir approach that Chef Redzepi has. He uses local products and seasonal products. He grows a part of his ingredients and goes in the wild to forage another part of his ingredients. He thus gives an authentic Nordic essence to his cuisine, using wild herbs and berries, and also a definite North Sea inclination, using the local fish and various kinds of seaweed and other marine ingredients that really induce a unique local terroir experience. He is thus credited with having redefined Nordic cuisine as such and invented the new Nordic cuisine. René Redzepi, Copenhagen and Denmark's pride, the stuff of legends. Number 4. Number 4 is an interesting individual. Number 4 is called Mr. Pascal Pot. He's a simple man from Strasbourg, France, in the old Alsace region. Ever since he was a boy, he has been in contact with the activity of growing things because he was a farmer's son. He's self-educated and left school at an early age. And approximately 20 years ago, this man got a piece of land in his Alsatian region, and it was a particularly arid piece of land. This man planted old varieties of tomatoes that he had kept for a long time. And he developed a method where he exposes his different plants to the harsh conditions where he wants them to thrive. Mr. Pot makes the tomato plants develop their resistance, and he makes them grow in an arid place or a particularly humid place, a place with a lot of mildew or different difficult conditions. And what happens is some of them die and some of them survive. And the fruits of the survivors, the first year, the fruits of the survivors are ridiculously small. But what he does is he keeps their seeds and replants them the next year. He discovered that the plants actually transmit the characteristics that they developed to their offspring or offshoots. After a few years, the result is plentiful, bountiful plants that can withstand dry climates and mildew, any conditions. So he developed the tomato conservatory, and in there he succeeded in creating tomatoes that need no extra water at all, not one drop, no fertilizer at all, and absolutely no pesticides. After 20 years of work, he thus has generated tomato varieties that are perfectly adapted to their terroir. Terroir, in the case you didn't listen to the podcast number 2, is the unique local ecosystem conditions and characteristics. He has done this with over 200 varieties of tomatoes, most of them being heirloom varieties. But he also did this with zucchinis, aubergines, and even peach trees, and many other fruits and vegetables, all making them not only survive, but really thrive in the harshest of conditions. No water, no fertilizer, no pesticides, and producing abundant fruit, like truly abundant. I'm not exaggerating at all. They're truly abundant fruits in really harsh conditions. But most of all, they're not just abundant, but they're really, truly, absolutely delicious. Everybody's unanimous on this. He makes the tomato plants that he raises make delicious fruit. Pascal Put and his legendary tomatoes, the stuff of legends. Number 5, we saved the best for last. Gisèle Lamoureux. Gisèle Lamoureux founded a collection of books that are guides to the wild plants of Quebec and eastern North America. She started out with her kind of hippie team in the 1970s, and she really worked a lot. She was a photographer and founded Fleurbec. It's the guidebook collection's name. All the while doing this, she helped entire populations reacquaint themselves with the usage and knowledge of wild plants. She photographed innumerable plants and documented them quite extensively. And she helped the population get closer to the plants in their environment through medicinal usage as well as culinary usage. So she photographed and identified hundreds and hundreds of different plants. And actually, she often coined a new name for them, where there was only a European or an English name for them. Sometimes there's various plants that have a European version that's very well known, but there is a sub-variety that's a North American version that does not have a French name. So she actually coined a new name for them in some cases. She raised awareness about the need for protections for certain plants, and one of them being wild garlic. Wild garlic is a truly delicious plant. However, it takes years and years and years to reproduce. So if people would know about it, they would just harvest plants and plants and plants, and they would actually kill off the population. So she coined a method for harvesting the wild garlic in such a way that you do not jeopardize its reproduction. So you harvest actually only a part of one leaf, because it's only a 2-leaf plant, and you can still have a little taste of what wild garlic is. Gisèle Lamoureux amassed such knowledge of wild plants and secured it in her innumerable works. She did many collaborations, and she did it in such a way that it may be used by future generations. It's a very important work, and it's a kind of very secret hero kind of work, because she got the National Order of Quebec eventually at the end of her career, but for a long, long time she worked very much under the radar. One of her most interesting feats is that she actually discovered a plant that had never been before entered in the scientific books. The plant's Latin name is in her honor. It's known as Arenaria peploides robusta forma Lamoureux, in honor of her name, Lamoureux. So Lamoureux. She even made the Quebec government adopt the plant of her choice. There was a movement for having a certain plant to become the national floral emblem of Quebec. And this is the versicolor iris. It's a kind of iris. It's a beautiful flower that is almost identical to the previous floral emblem, which was quite simply the French fleur de lis. But the French fleur de lis actually does not grow indigenously in Quebec. It's a French plant. So the versicolor iris is indigenous to Quebec. And eventually the government adopted this flower as the national floral emblem of Quebec. Sadly, Gisèle Lamoureux passed away on the 23rd of June, 2018. Now, she did an amazing contribution to the preservation and knowledge of Canadian and Quebec environments. She will definitely be missed. Gisèle Lamoureux, the stuff of legends.
There is every summer in Quebec a lot of farms that need people to work and pick fruit. So there's a lot of fruit pickers that come from other countries to work in various different farms and orchards. And some come from South America, some come from Asia. Many pick fruit and get their salary and go back. And it's a yearly activity, and it goes along very well. Now, there's different families that often live on the farm, and every day they go for work together, and they go back to sleep at night. And so one farmer who I, through common acquaintance knew, was talking about this fact that on his farm there was many families that were working. They were making fruit packages, small I think blueberries and raspberries and different kinds of small fruits they were all packing. But he was adamant that there was this one family that was I think from Southeast Asia, and that family was so devoted to their work. They were every morning working very well, and all the children were all in coordination to make the most beautiful packs of these fruits. The fruits were perfectly aligned. All the bad fruit were very rigorously discarded, and they aligned the fruits in a special design, and they had this special pride in their work. And they, even though they didn't get extra money for it, they would just out of a desire to make some wonderful work. The farmer was absolutely amazed by their devotion and by the quality of their product. Now, of course, he gave them more money, but that's not the question, actually. The question is that this family took upon itself to make something that was exceptional and that had an exceptional quality, and they put a lot of love into their work, and their work bore fruit. So even in this small manifestation, it's definitely a manifestation of splendor. Everyone actually has access to splendor in the fruits of our labor. Attaining equilibrium, productivity, and mastery enables each and every one of us to contribute a decent measure of splendor to this transient world. There's only one splendor and many different manifestations of it. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions or comments, it would be appreciated for you to send them. You can either comment below or comment on the States of Splendor website, which is STATESOFSPLENDOR.com, and you can also send us an email at info@statesofsplendor.com. Until next time, this is Patrick Seekin. Have a nice week. Bye-bye.